makes it really hard to live there. I mean, I look at her, I just want to break out and cry because I love the girl so much, and I have loved her for a long, long time. And the one thing that I knew that Brenda liked was money.
They say, happy wife, happy life. But what if a happy wife costs you your life? For Rob, it seemed like the ultimate sacrifice. And that clip in the intro says it all. This shocking case out of Oklahoma City shows us that not everything is as perfect as it looks. We've all seen families who seem to have it all, but behind closed doors, things are far from what they appear. And this is one case that will leave you questioning, could it have turned out differently? Or was this always meant to end in tragedy? I'll leave that question for you to answer by the end of this video. The case we're talking about today actually happened on November 20th, 2001. And sadly, this month marks the 23rd year since it all unfolded. On that day, Rob Andrew and his wife, Brenda Andrew, were no longer on good terms. In fact, they had been living separately for a while. But despite everything, it was clear that Rob still loved Brenda deeply. Everyone, including the church community in Edmond, Oklahoma, knew how much he cared for her. Even though they were living apart, Rob still made sure to check on Brenda and their 2 kids whenever he could. But by this point, Brenda was done with him. She had even limited Rob's access to their children. However, on that particular day, November 20th, which was Thanksgiving, they had an agreement. It was Rob's turn to take care of the kids. So that night, Rob put on his best suit and drove to what was once the home he shared with Brenda and their children. As he drove, he even had a phone call with his trusted friend, and it was reported that his friend could hear how excited Rob was, how much he was looking forward to seeing Brenda again.
Rob had called my house around 5:30, telling me how hurried he'd been all day and that he was looking forward to picking the kids up and spending a long weekend with them for Thanksgiving.
But when Rob arrived and pulled into the driveway, something felt off. Instead of seeing the family he hoped to reunite with, Rob noticed Brenda standing alone in the garage. He quickly hung up the phone and stepped out of the car. He walked into the garage, and before he could even say a word, Brenda spoke up, mentioning that the furnace had gone out. It had gotten cold in the house, and she asked him if he could help fix it. Rob, being the good man he was, agreed to help. He crouched down to examine the furnace while Brenda was standing nearby. But what happened next was something that no one could have predicted. The garage door was still open behind them, and Rob was barely getting a look at the heater when, out of nowhere, 2 masked men appeared, guns drawn. Before he even had time to react, the gunmen opened fire. Rob was shot twice in the chest, and Brenda was hit in the upper arm. The chaos unfolded so quickly that it was almost unbelievable. Minutes later, Brenda managed to call the police, telling them that she and Rob had both been shot by 2 masked men right inside their own garage. To paint the scene, Rob and Brenda lived in a suburban neighborhood in the upscale Landsbrook, Oklahoma, known for its affluent residents and well-kept homes. The area was seen as a safe, peaceful place with nice cars parked along the street and neighbors who looked out for one another. So, when the news broke, it shook not only the community, but also the local police, who were baffled by such violence in their calm neighborhood. Now Brenda, who was wounded in the arm, was treated at the hospital and released, but Rob's family didn't learn of his death until they saw the heartbreaking news on the 10 o'clock broadcast. From there, things only got stranger and more disturbing. When the police arrived at the scene, there was no sign of a break-in, robbery, or anything missing from the home. Rob's wallet was still in his pocket, and nothing in the house had been disturbed, leading investigators to believe the attack was planned and specifically targeted the couple. But why? Who would have a reason to go after this family, known by everyone as kind, friendly, and close-knit? To answer that, let's look at who Rob Andrew was. By the way, I post true crime and new cases here every day. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing. It helps a lot.
Rob Andrew was salt of the earth. I mean, this is a Christian man, attended church all the time, a loving father, just a great guy, very successful businessman as well.
As you've just heard, Rob was a successful, respected executive in an advertising firm, a job that brought in a solid 6 digits income and earned him a great deal of admiration. Beyond his career, he was deeply involved in his community and served as a deacon at his local church. He was there every Sunday for services and even led early morning men's meetings on Mondays, where he was known to counsel and support other men in the community. Rob's faith and dedication to helping others made him well loved by everyone around him. But if there was anything Rob was most proud of, it was his family. He had fallen hard for Brenda back when they first met. Their story goes way back to the early 80s. Brenda, a high school senior, had a bit of a crush on Rob, who was in his freshman year of college at the time. She'd often ask his brother, Tom, about him whenever they'd cross paths at the local pool, which eventually led Tom to play matchmaker. Not long after, the two started dating in 1982 and got married in 1984. The couple had 2 children, and Rob was the sort of dad who seemed to live for his family. He even named their first daughter Tri-City, a unique name that, according to Rob, would be perfect if she ever wanted to run for office with the catchy slogan, Tri-City Electricity. It was a quirky, light-hearted idea that reflected Rob's creative spirit and humor. So now, if everyone loved Rob, what about Brenda? Now, Brenda Evers was born on December 16, 1963, and like many people, her life seemed like the perfect storybook beginning. She grew up in a strict religious household, which shaped much of who she became. Raised in an environment that valued discipline, she excelled in school, quickly becoming known for her sharp mind and straight A grades. And she wasn't just book smart. Brenda was involved in multiple clubs, attended football games, and even twirled a baton as part of her high school team. To the outside world, she seemed like the ideal student, poised, proper, and always well-dressed. But beneath that polished exterior, Brenda wasn't the most popular kid in school. In fact, she was quiet, reserved, and kept mostly to herself. She wasn't the type to throw back drinks at parties or live for the weekend. Instead, she spent her time studying or helping others study, building a reputation as the goody two-shoes in her class. She didn't smoke, didn't drink, and didn't join in on the usual teenage rebellion that so many of her peers engaged in. This made her somewhat of an outsider, a nerd in the eyes of the other students. So Rob and Brenda seemed like the perfect couple. They both valued family and faith. Rob was a dedicated Baptist, and Brenda was a devoted Lutheran. Brenda's sister Kimberly even said, "I think their values were pretty much the same." Even though he was Baptist and she was Lutheran, in their religious beliefs, they were a lot alike. To everyone around them, they looked like the American dream, a stable, faith-filled couple with a beautiful family. But as we know, looks can be deceiving. Beneath the surface, Rob and Brenda's marriage was far from perfect, though no one could see it at the time. Rob, deeply in love with Brenda, started to notice subtle shifts in her behavior, and these changes began to weigh heavily on him. His love for her made him willing to accept her mistakes and overlook her flaws, but the growing tension in their relationship couldn't be ignored forever. He started keeping a journal, quietly writing down every time he suspected Brenda was spending time with another man. Apparently, Brenda's habits shifted soon after she and Rob got married. Rob's career often required him to move across the country, meaning Brenda was left on her own a lot. At one point, Rob took a job in Texas, while Brenda stayed behind in Oklahoma. Although she eventually joined him, it wasn't the only time that Rob's work seemed to come first. Brenda had to give up her own job opportunities and friendships every time they moved for Rob's success. After a while, all of these moves took a toll. She was tired of being left behind and sacrificing her own dreams for Rob's career. When Rob moved back to Oklahoma in 1988, Brenda didn't immediately follow. In fact, she didn't return until December 23, 1990, just around the time when she had their first child. The gap in time raised some eyebrows. People began to wonder if the baby was even Rob's, given how long they'd been apart. But despite these doubts, Rob never questioned her. He embraced her and welcomed her back with open arms, convinced that everything was still fine between them. When Brenda finally moved to Oklahoma, she made a decision to quit her job at the bank and embrace the role of a stay-at-home mom. To Rob, this seemed like the ideal situation, a picture-perfect family life, just like they had always dreamed of. But something about Brenda had changed. She wasn't the same woman Rob had married. They had both been active members of their church community, with Rob serving as a deacon and Brenda teaching Sunday school. However, Brenda's behavior soon began to raise eyebrows within the church. She started dressing with more confidence, flaunting her figure and styling her hair in a way that was far from the modest, wholesome image she once projected. There was one particular occasion when Rob invited Brenda to a business dinner, a formal event where executives gather to network, make deals, and discuss business. Rob, known for being openly religious, took pride in his faith and often expressed its importance in his life. However, when he arrived at the dinner with Brenda, who was dressed in an outfit more fitting for a night out than a professional event, his colleagues took notice. Now, in Rob's journal, this specific incident was even documented in detail. But as we dive deeper into his entries, we uncover far more disturbing events happening behind closed doors. In one particularly telling entry, Rob revealed how Brenda would buy lingerie and deliberately leave it out on the bed where he could easily see it. Naturally, Rob assumed she had something special planned for him, but she never followed through. It was almost as if she were taunting him, offering him something tantalizing but then pulling it away. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. It became a repeated pattern, and Rob's frustration and confusion started to grow. In another entry, Rob described a moment when he was driving by a motel and saw Brenda with another man. At one point, Rob started confiding in his friends and pastor about the growing problems in his marriage. Those who were close to him later testified that Brenda had become verbally abusive, often telling Rob that she hated him and that their marriage had been a mistake. So the big question is, why did Rob tolerate it? Why stay in a situation that caused him so much emotional pain? Some might argue that he was simply trying to make his marriage work, clinging to the hope that things would improve. As a deeply religious man, Rob likely felt a sense of duty to keep his family intact, no matter how much he was hurting. His love for Brenda and his faith in the institution of marriage kept him holding on, even when it seemed like everything was falling apart. This brings us to James Pavat, another member of their church community. James was not only a deacon like Rob, but also worked in the life insurance industry. Whenever Rob was away, Brenda and James became noticeably close. In fact, it got so bad that the church leaders decided to step in and ask both of them to step down from their positions as Sunday school teachers. Then, one of the most shocking moments was when Brenda, who was still married to Rob, decided to go on vacation with James. And it wasn't just the two of them, it was a full family vacation, with Rob's children included. The pictures from the trip showed Brenda, James, and the kids all laughing, eating together, and having a good time. They looked like a family, as if James was the one married to Brenda, not Rob. Now you'd think Rob would have had some suspicions, right? Well, it turns out he did. Rob and James weren't just acquaintances. They were friends. They had even gone on a hunting trip together. And remember, James was a life insurance agent, so he sold Rob an insurance policy with a massive $800,000 policy, and the beneficiary was none other than Brenda. Rob, believing James was his friend, didn't hesitate to sign the papers at that time. But little did he know that he was unknowingly signing a death sentence. The trust he had in both of them would soon turn into a nightmare. By the summer of 2001, James had already divorced his wife, Suk Hui. Then, in October, Brenda filed for divorce from Rob. Things started to get ugly. Rob decided to move out of their home, but Brenda didn't keep her feelings to herself. She became more vocal, telling friends that she hated Rob and even wished he was dead. Then, on October 26, 2001, the situation took a frightening turn. Rob was backing out of his garage when he felt something strange with his brakes. Concerned, he took his car to a mechanic who discovered that the brake lines had been deliberately cut. If Rob had been driving at high speed, as he often did, this could have easily been a deadly accident. And while Rob was at the mechanic's, he received a call from an anonymous person, claiming that Brenda had been in a terrible car accident and was in critical condition. Panic would have overtaken anyone, but Rob, ever the skeptic, decided to call the hospital where the accident supposedly happened. To his shock, the hospital had no record of anyone by the name of Brenda. That's when it clicked for Rob. This was all a setup. Someone was trying to trick him into driving recklessly and putting his life in danger. So he went straight to the police and told them he suspected Brenda and James were trying to kill him for the insurance money.
Oklahoma City Police Department.
Hi there. I'd like to report a client. My brake lines have been cut.
Oh.
That sounds like attempted murder, don't you think?
After that chilling experience with the brake lines, Rob decided to remove Brenda from his life insurance policy and make his brother the new beneficiary. But James found out, and he told Rob that the policy couldn't be changed because Brenda owned it. That's when things took an even darker turn. It was later discovered that Brenda and James had tried to transfer the ownership of the insurance policy to Brenda without Rob's knowledge. They forged his signature and backdated it to March 2001. This forgery became a crucial piece of evidence that the police were desperately seeking. They got their hands on the life insurance policy and consulted a handwriting expert to examine it closely. They didn't just look at this document. They reviewed several other papers Rob had signed over the past 10 years to verify that the signature was inconsistent with his usual style. Now here's where it gets interesting. Rob had a distinct way of signing his name. He would add a squiggle under his signature, kind of like a little fish symbol. If you've ever seen the Christian fish symbol, that's what it was. It wasn't just a random scribble. It was something Rob did every single time he signed a document. However, this unique squiggle fish was missing from the signature on the life insurance policy.
Corner of his signature. I then began looking at signature after signature after signature, and that fish was there.
As the investigation into Rob's tragic death continued, the police began to pay closer attention to the details of the crime scene. Rob and Brenda had been shot in the garage, with at least 3 gunshots heard, but only 2 bullet casings were found, one from a .22 caliber revolver and another from a shotgun. This discovery led the police to conclude that 2 different firearms were used, meaning there had to be at least 2 shooters involved. Brenda's account was that 2 masked men had shown up outside the garage, firing at both her and Rob from a distance of about 15 to 20 feet. Her story made sense at first, but the police soon began to notice several inconsistencies. One major red flag was Brenda's blouse. When they examined it, they found not just blood, but also gunpowder on the fabric. This was strange because when a gun is fired, gunpowder sprays out of the barrel along with the bullet. The amount of gunpowder found on Brenda's blouse suggested something different. Given the large amount of gunpowder on her sleeve, the investigators quickly realized that the shots must have been fired from much closer than Brenda had claimed. Her estimate of 15 to 20 feet seemed too far off. In fact, the evidence pointed to the guns being fired just inches away from her, suggesting a much more intimate and deliberate attack than what Brenda had described. Another piece of the puzzle came from Rob's shotgun. Investigators were told that Rob owned a 16-gauge shotgun, but Brenda had refused to let him take it when he moved out. When the police searched Andrew's home, however, they couldn't find the shotgun. The next clue came from the neighbor's house next door. The neighbors had been out of town during the murder, but they had left Brenda a key to their home. A search of their property revealed something troubling. Someone had entered the attic through a small opening in a bedroom closet. Inside the attic, the police found a spent 16-gauge shotgun shell on the bedroom floor, as well as several .22 caliber bullets scattered around the attic. No signs of forced entry into the neighbor's home suggested that Brenda had access to the property. Interestingly, the shotgun shell found in the neighbor's home matched the same brand and gauge as the shell found in the garage, further linking Brenda to the crime scene. The investigation took another significant turn when James's daughter, Jana, came forward with a critical piece of evidence. She had lent her car to her father on the day of the murder, as he had offered to have it serviced. When her father returned the car the following morning, Jana realized that it hadn't been serviced at all. As she checked the car, she found a .22 caliber bullet on the floorboard. The bullet was the same brand as the 3.22 caliber rounds found in the neighbor's attic. When Jana confronted her father about the bullet, James told her to throw it away. This raised further suspicions, especially when investigators later discovered that James had purchased a handgun just a week before the murder. All of these clues began to paint a troubling picture, with James and Brenda's involvement in Rob's death becoming clearer with every new piece of evidence uncovered. So, on the day of Rob's funeral, investigators had prepared to bring Brenda and James in for questioning, hoping to get more answers. However, when the funeral came, neither Brenda nor James showed up. In fact, not even Rob's children were there. It was a strange and troubling situation because how could someone not show up to their own husband's funeral, especially when their kids were involved? But instead of attending the funeral, Brenda, her 2 children, and James Pavat made a bold decision. They packed up and fled to Mexico. While in Mexico, James didn't seem to think anyone was onto him. He started calling his daughter, Jana, multiple times, asking her to send him money. He had no idea that Jana was actually working with the FBI. She had been cooperating with them and sharing everything she knew about her father's and Brenda's involvement in Rob's murder. By late February of the year 2002, James and Brenda had run out of money. With nowhere else to go, they crossed back into the United States, thinking they could blend in. But their plan didn't last long. The authorities had been tracking them, and soon enough, they were arrested in Hidalgo, Texas. They were quickly brought back to Oklahoma City, where they were extradited to face charges for their involvement in Rob's death. The trial of James, which began in 2003, was a pivotal moment. His character remained somewhat of a mystery throughout the proceedings. He didn't speak much, and not much was known about his life. The jury convicted James of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to death. Oklahoma, known for its tough stances on crime, handed down the death sentence with little hesitation.
James Dwight Pavat, guilty of murder in the first degree. Fix his punishment at death.
According to his ex-wife, Sukhoi Pavat, despite the fact that James was accused of murder, Sukhoi revealed that she still cared for him, admitting that testifying against her ex-husband was difficult. She explained that when James was in love, he would go to great lengths for the person he loved, and this was something she had experienced during their 9 years of marriage. While Sukhoi testified, she recalled being shocked when James first brought up the idea of divorce. She was told that it was for her protection due to the struggles James faced during his time in the Special Forces, including issues related to his time in Korea, which he said was the only place that felt safe in the world. Eventually, Sukhoi moved to Korea briefly, but returned to Oklahoma City after James claimed he had made the biggest mistake of his life. However, when Sukhoi returned, she noticed a drastic change in James. He was no longer the kind, loving person she had known for years. "He wasn't the same Jim I knew for 9 years," she told the court, describing how something about him seemed wrong. Despite this, Sukhoi continued to testify that she believed James's motives in the divorce were not entirely rooted in malicious intent. A year later, it was Brenda's turn in court. Like James, she was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution argued that Brenda had fired the second shot that killed Rob after James had shot him once, knocking him to the ground. Evidence supported this theory because blood splatter on Brenda's pants was consistent with close-range gunfire. After the shooting, she called the police to report the incident, but she also gave James the key to a neighbor's house where he could hide while the authorities investigated. The neighbors, who had nothing to do with the crime, were caught up in Brenda's plan. During her trial, the prosecution painted Brenda as a heartless, manipulative woman with a history of affairs. Testimonies from Rob's friends highlighted the troubled marriage and suggested that Brenda had been abusive toward Rob. By the end of the trial, Brenda was portrayed as a sadistic and ruthless woman, a serial adulterer, and the jury sentenced her to death. Over the years, we've seen countless cases where life insurance policies became the driving force behind tragic murders. And more often than not, it's the seemingly perfect family at the center of it all. For Brenda Andrew, some argue that she didn't have to resort to murder. Instead, she could have continued the divorce proceedings, filed for alimony, and received monthly support from Rob, who had a 6-figure income. Yet, instead of pursuing that path, she chose a darker one. Now, Brenda sits on death row, waiting for her execution. She was recently denied an appeal, yet again, just last year. The 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld her murder conviction in a 2-1 decision. Her case has been relisted multiple times by the Supreme Court, sparking renewed interest in her story. Meanwhile, James has exhausted all his appeals and is now eligible for execution. His execution date was initially set for July 11, 2024, but it has since been delayed, and the new date remains a mystery. So, the question remains, could this have turned out differently, or was this always destined to end in tragedy? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching.